The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals sides for free speech for pro-life centers in Maryland. Hi, I'm Shawn Akers, Vice President for Middle Eastern Affairs with Liberty Counsel, and joining me today in studio is Ron Miller, author and commentator and blogger. Ron, it's good to have you with us.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks.
Ron, you and I talked earlier in the week. We both have histories being raised in Louisiana, but you are also a Maryland transplant, having spent the last few years there and run for office there. You're quite invested in the state of Maryland, and we've got some interesting news out of the state of Maryland. As you know, there were two laws in the state of Maryland. The first law requires centers that are providing pro-life counseling to post signs saying they don't provide abortions or birth control. The second law at issue here in Montgomery County required centers to post signs saying that they don't have a licensed medical professional on staff and that local health officer encourages women who are or may be pregnant to consult with a licensed healthcare provider. In other words, the state is making, in both Baltimore and in Montgomery County, is forcing these pro-life counseling centers to tell everybody up front, you're not going to get an abortion here, you're not going to get birth control here, and we don't have any licensed medical folks here. So in other words, just stay away.
That's exactly what they were intending to do, and the court ruling that struck down those laws was exactly right. The government can't dictate to an organization what they're going to say or do. That's a First Amendment issue, and they rightly read it as such. So in a state that calls itself the free state but hasn't been free, quite frankly, for quite some time, this was a very good ruling.
You know, it's ironic that even in this day and age, we still don't seem to get it, that the constitutionally protected, God-given right of free speech includes the right not to speak. If anything, it's got a greater protection because being compelled to do anything is something that's been anathema in the United States. Very, very seldom is a law allowed that causes someone to take a particular action. That's why money damages are so much more prevalent than specific performance, where somebody's required to do something. The court is always shied against that. Now, when you take that to the realm of speech, where you're saying that you're going to have to say something, it takes on an entirely different dynamic. And then when you ratchet that up even further, Ron, in this case, to say that you're going to have to, in essence, advertise against yourself, then it goes to just a ridiculous level. It's hard to believe that the lawmakers in Maryland would even consider passing such a bill, but that's exactly what they did. But the Fourth Circuit did rightfully employ a little common sense here. Now, let's get to the root of what's going on, Ron. Why do you think it would be so important to the lawmakers in Maryland to control the speech of these pro-life counselors?
It's important to them because they are pro-abortion, by and large, and they're trying to steer people to Planned Parenthood and other organizations which ostensibly are providing the full range of family planning services, but rarely, if ever, do they counsel you against taking the life of your child if that's what you come there to do. For the most part, they're trying to tell people these are the only options you have, these are your only choices, and this whole notion of you keeping the child is just foolishness. And the fact that it's also a issue of faith. It's important to note that the Archdiocese of Baltimore was involved in this case as well on the side of the pregnancy centers. It's a combination of promoting the killing of children and suppressing faith-based speech at the same time.
You know, Ron, it's pretty well common sense, but it's also savvy on their parts that we go to places to be given a particular thing. In other words, you don't go to a used car lot to be told you don't need a used car. Because you know that when you get there, the advice you're going to be given is not only do you need a car, but this car is the perfect one for you. And what we see here are two sets of organizations. One set that provides abortions. They are offering their bread and butter. What they do, the thing that they offer is the opportunity for you to terminate a pregnancy. This is what they do. When they have those medical people on staff, that's why they're there, is to provide that particular procedure. Then you've got another group that exists to tell you, you really should think about this, that there may be something you haven't thought about with this life that's growing inside you. Maybe you should think about this before you do something that you're going to regret. The state here is clearly siding with one side's position, substantive speech, over another, and felt like these two things can't coexist in the marketplace of ideas, that one set of ideas has to have government endorsement and the other literally has to be forced to speak on behalf of its ideological competitor. Now, you tell me what nation that makes sense in, Ron.
Well, that's one of the reasons why whenever people ask me where I was from, I used to say I'm from the People's Republic of Maryland. This is a state that has been in the hands of one political party since after the days after the Civil War. They've had only 6 governors from the other party in that time frame. The registration is 2-1 in favor of one party over the other. It's basically a one-party state. And so people of faith who are conservative in their values have struggled to try and have their rights protected. And people think nothing in places like Baltimore or Montgomery County or Prince George's County of passing regulations and statutes which will suppress their rights. What we're seeing here is people are pushing back. They've had referenda. An option that was never employed before, but with the wonders of technology, they are now able to marshal the voices of people who believe differently from the legislators and the people of Maryland that are in power, and they're able to put things on the ballot. Maryland passed some rules on immigration. Well, now it's going to be on the ballot. It's going to go to the people. They passed a law on so-called same-sex marriage. Well, now that's going to go to the ballot. And these are the weapons that they're having to use in that state because they are not able to change the nature of the government and the government's suppression of all of these different points of view. There's one way to do things in Maryland, and I think people are finally getting tired of it, and they're starting to fight back, whether it's in the court system, as in this case, or using referendums to get things on the ballot.
Well, you hope, Ron, that the people of Maryland will stand up regardless of how they feel about something like abortion, and say at very least the citizens of Maryland are bright enough and wise enough to make their own decisions in the marketplace of ideas. Why in the world are you so afraid of pro-life speech that you're not only going to suppress the pro-life speech, but make them, cause them to speak against their own interest? What are you so afraid of? Why don't you at least let the advocates for each position say their piece? Now, whether the government takes part in those other things is an entirely different issue. The people of the state of Maryland, as well as the people of the United States, should mandate that their tax dollars do not go to the provision of abortion. If you're going to go get an abortion, we're not going to pay for it. But that's another form of forced activity, and in some cases, forced speech, Ron.
Where we are today is in a culture where it's not sufficient for you to have a different point of view. We don't have a marketplace of ideas as far as the elites are concerned. We have one set of ideas. We have one narrative. And if you don't subscribe to it, then you are either going to be bullied or intimidated into either silence or submission. And that goes against every clause of freedom of conscience that we've ever had in our country.
One of the incredible resources that's available to you, our listeners, is Liberty Counsel. We have a staff at Liberty Counsel that works tirelessly not only to represent the American people in these issues, but to provide you with a plethora of resources. If you'll go to our website, let me encourage you, go to the Liberty Counsel website. It's very easy. It's lc.org. Look at the resources that are there for you to educate yourself, to understand exactly what is going on and the foundations for it. That's lc.org, or you can call us anytime at 1-800-671-1776.